poorest schools in America have the least amount of funding. And you know, your race and your background still predict your opportunity. Your zip code still predicts your opportunity. We're looking at slavery and redlining and all of those practices that happened, they still predict opportunity for health outcomes, educational outcomes, job opportunities, and they continue for generations. So looking at those programs and having that national view is where it came from. I'm a professor at Howard County Community College. I teach arts and the cultural context and the political context of art. And I also teach teachers arts education. And the way we teach in our country right now is very audio and visual, and that's not how all kids learn. You can change how you teach to approach the differences in learning, and that is something also that I think we need to change in our country. And I think that's it. So I'm a school board member, I work in education, K through 12, looking at programs, funding of programs, and I also used to be a professor at Howard Community College.
Thank you. Qasim.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Qasim. Just a quick correction of the first American Muslim, not the first American. Like to send
Did I not say Muslim?
No, you said first American, which I'll take it. Yeah. You can't send me back, right? Thanks, y'all, for being here so early in the morning. And you know, so for me, this is a multifaceted question of how did I get involved in this space. I was born in Pakistan. My family migrated here. My story begins about 32 years ago in Virginia. Pakistan, if you have studied the country, began as kind of a beacon for religious freedom and tolerance, and it's kind of deteriorated into anything but that. And so that childhood, that young adulthood informed my thinking here in the United States. And the question always comes to my mind that if I was, you know, a young man who had education and access to resources, when Pakistan began this really sad decline, what would I have done? And I find a lot of parallels between Pakistan in the 1970s and early 80s and the United States right now. And just some of the new administration's laws that we're implementing. Latest change is that ICE can detain anybody within the entire United States, and I suspect has been here undocumented in the last 2 years and without any actual due process can have them deported, which is just horrifying from any sense of justice and fairness. And so for me, this is really about being involved in the process, making sure we have a seat at the table, making sure that there is actual representation of leadership that reflects the community. For too long, I believe our communities of color have either been marginalized or haven't been actively involved enough. And there have been some amazing trailblazers, and we can talk about those folks, and even to this day there are amazing trailblazers. And I think that it's long overdue that we took a seat at the table instead of waiting for permission. I'm a human rights lawyer. I've spent the last decade or so working on women's rights issues, racial justice, criminal justice reform, expanding healthcare and education access, working to combat wealth inequality. One data point that always frightens me is that right now in July 2019, wealth inequality is worse than it was in July 1929, just a few months before Black Tuesday, before the Great Depression. So it's a question of what's going to happen over the next year or 2 years as this administration's really bizarre tax policies start to have an impact on the blue-collar worker. And so I see this as a calling, not just from a standpoint of civil rights, but also from just foundational human rights. We often forget how fragile our democracy is and the balance that keeps it together and what happens when there's a slight shift, as we're seeing right now. So I hope that by being involved in these kinds of forums, by inshallah winning the Senate seat, we can restore some more fairness and justice to our leadership and truly make it reflective of the diversity that is our community.
Thank you. I like that you're looking forward there, because I next want to ask, like, how do we promote and continue to inspire a culture of political activism? How do we go on to engage our communities and do that effectively?
One of the things that really works is education. It's still people who come from our countries don't spend significant amount of time way American political system is set up. So just going and talking to them and explaining what you can do by being a member, by being here, the opportunity that you have, and then explain that you have to be at the table, otherwise you're going to be on the table. And once they start realizing and you start some success stories sharing with them, then they get it. But it's still, we have a long way to go. But if we don't wake up, particularly in the environment of hate and fear and confusion that this president has created, this is an opportunity for us, despite our differences, to come together and respond to this. Otherwise, what you're going to hear is what you are hearing. You know, Islam creates problem for you guys. Muslims are terrorists. You guys hate America. Go back home. We all have to get together and show that we don't differentiate ourselves between whether we are American or we are Muslim. We call ourselves as proud American Muslims. And we should also send a message, not just to educate our community, but to the President of the White House, that not only we will continue building our mosque in every single major city in the United States, but we will also are building our Muslim cemeteries in this country, in major cities, to send a message that America is our home. That's where we're going to live, and that's where we're going to die. I think that's the message we should convince to all of these people, and work together on this as one team. And I think we're going to make a change.
I think your presence, being somewhere, being in the community, getting out, listening, engaging, and creating opportunity. So you listen to what people need and what their issues are, and then you help them figure out how they're going to get those solved. That's how you engage people. If you're telling them what they need, I think that's a harder conversation. So really listening and engaging in that way. And for me, that's worked really well to create intersectional opportunities, is really getting together with people who have issues that are similar to the ones that speak to me in my heart about justice. And when it feels unfair, you know, one of the things Trump's done for us is bring us together. He's brought all these otherized communities and allies in the same room saying, enough, enough. We will not stand for this, and we will bond together to address this. And I think that is a powerful way to build leaders. And then creating opportunities. Every room I step into, I say, who's missing? I look around, I make space, and then I pull up a chair. Everywhere that I can do that, I do that. And sometimes it comes with really difficult conversations and attacks, and you called me a racist kind of comments. And you have to push past those and have people join you at the table and create a bigger, louder, unstoppable voice. And I think that's how you build leaders. And sisterhood. I mean, for me, that's been, two of my sisters here. Amazing sisters. Annie, Heather Shaw, and Khalida Hassan have been in my campaign. I couldn't have won without them, and have just stood up for people who didn't have a voice and were willing to put their time and their energy and lift each other. We have a whole sisterhood and brotherhood that just lifts each other. We don't tear each other down, and we dial in. We don't call out. We dial in. When there's a problem, when there is an issue, you build each other up. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
I'll tell you a quick story. My son, who's 10 now, when he learned about how this administration was banning Syrian refugees, and refugee children in particular, he was devastated. And it hit him harder than I expected a young kid to really kind of understand what was happening. And so when I told him I'm running for Senate, his eyes lit up and said, Abu, does this mean that if you win, you can arrest the president? And I said, no, it doesn't exactly work that way. And he goes, all right, well, I've lost interest then. And he kind of went about to it. But in that is instructive of how do you organize and how do you get people involved. And to the point that my colleague just made is you have to meet people where they are. and understand what their needs actually are. And I have an acronym for this, it's called RISE, and for me, this just very quickly, the first step is to re-educate ourselves on what the needs of the community actually are. Your experiences are your experiences, they're not the diversity that is our community. Black, white, brown, immigrant, born in the US, and every conceivable shade or change that comes in. So re-educating yourself is crucial. Second is understanding your implicit biases, and we all have them. You know, the fact that you're a human being means you have implicit biases. And understanding those is going to be crucial because you cannot represent someone or represent their needs unless you understand what assumptions or false assumptions you already have. That's, I think, the hardest part, because we all want to believe that we're these like noble and just and objective people when, you know, we're not. We're human beings, we have different experiences. And I think the best way is the S, and that's by serving the communities before a leadership role to earn that leadership role. And what I mean by that is if the first time you show up to a community is to ask them for something, you're doing yourself a disservice, and more importantly, you're doing them a disservice. You need to be involved in the trenches up front to better understand what they need and how you can contribute to them. And then finally is the elevation point, right? And this part, one of my colleagues, Dr. Swad of the University of Chicago, has a great quote that don't be a voice for the voiceless, just learn to pass the mic. And I love this because so often, you know, activists and public servants think that they need to be this voice for the voiceless, when in reality, what their job should be is to use their platform to elevate those voices that are already marginalized. And I think that when you do that, what you do is you remove yourself from being the bottleneck to get people involved, and you help people recognize and understand the opportunities that they have. My colleague mentioned the importance of education. This is a critical element of it. To let people know that this is your country as well, and here is how you can engage, and rather than speaking for them, let them tell their own story much more successfully. And I think that if we do that on a consistent level, I'll close with this last point on this, over time we'll see change. You know, we live in a clickbait, retweet, how many likes did you get culture. We want to see instant gratification. And sometimes recognizing that we didn't get to where we are due to just one election or due to just 1 year helps us understand that the reformation of this isn't going to be done by one election. You know, Trump losing in 2020 is not going to suddenly solve racism and misogyny in America. It will take time, but that's where each of us need to play that role in re-educating ourselves, understanding our implicit biases, serving our communities, and then elevating those voices that are marginalized to truly bring about that change.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, you can.
And if you have candidates in your community and they are progressive candidates, understanding that there is no perfect candidate. And no one will agree with your values 100%, but getting behind, supporting, and elevating, funding your candidates that are in your community that are aligned in values with you. I think that's an important elevation of leaders.
Yeah, to that point, my campaign manager is right there if you want to help with the funding. So.
Hey, there you are.
Yeah, thank you all. We do have to cut it short. I just want to emphasize that today what we're really talking about is like decreasing disparity by increasing education, passing the mic, and elevating our leaders. And I think that's beautiful. That's also what Jetpack tries to do. So if you have a chance, check us out, JETPACINC on Facebook. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hey, assalamu alaikum everybody. Good morning. I know yesterday was a long day. I guess you guys are giving us the message, 1 day conference is good, 2 days is too much. But inshallah, people are coming in, so that's a good thing. I know the panel that was just up here, if you would like to go to CS 7000,